This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Super Console X2. It's a little Android-based retro console that you can buy on Amazon, and it comes with over 100,000 retro games. All the games from your childhood in one little box, all pre-configured and set up, ready to go. And it comes with everything you need. Is it too good to be true? Well, maybe. But maybe not. But maybe. Probably not, though. Probably. Let's check out together and find out, shall we? Hello, hi there, I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video. Sorry I haven't posted in a while. I've been really busy with some important stuff. I had to clean my room, for real this time. My mom said that she was going to turn off my internet if I didn't. I called her bluff, so she did. And then she couldn't figure out how to turn it back on. So I had to fix the router and clean my room. And then when I was cleaning my room, I broke my bed. Not from jumping on it. It just broke all by itself. So we had to get a bed repair guy over to fix it. And then I was so tired from all of that, and I just needed to chill out and play with some of my new toys like my iNeo Air. So I've just been so swamped with all this stuff. But I'm finally back today with another tech review. And today, it's the Super Console X2. The Super Console X2 is an Android-based emulation console that plays all your old favorite retro games. For those of you who aren't in the know, these retro gaming consoles are just Android boxes. They come pre-configured with all the ROMs and emulators, all set up and ready to rock, in theory. Sometimes there's some issues with some of the games, which we'll talk about in a bit, but generally they're a really fun toy to have all your old favorite retro games at your fingertips. And I can tell you right now that this one is no different. In the box, we get the console, a USB microSD card reader with a 256 gigabyte microSD card in it, a remote control for the Android side of this thing, and a word paper that tells you about some things and stuff. And some controllers. It's those typical cheap knockoff PS2 style wireless controllers. I don't hate these. They're not great, but they work fine. I play with them and I get by. And they're wireless, so that's nice. Some of these emulation consoles have custom shells. They actually look like old retro consoles, which I prefer actually. But most of them are just plain boring old Android boxes. Like this one. It's pretty boring. But at least it's not ugly. And you won't have to hide it when the adults come over to visit. This version of the Super Console X doesn't have an internal SD card slot, so you need to use this little USB dongle. And then since there's only one USB slot left, you need to use this USB hub to plug in both your controllers. It's not the most elegant solution in the world, but it works. And the USB hub looks good too, so I'll give them a pass on that. We also have an Ethernet port, HDMI port, and a headphone jack, and a power button. The setup is super easy. You just plug it into your TV or monitor, plug in your controllers, plug in the USB SD card reader, and plug in the power, and then push the little power button. It's so easy that even you could figure it out, if you can believe that. Once you boot it up, you'll be greeted by a splash screen, followed by a cool little intro video. Once you're in, you'll be greeted by Emulation Station. This is a front end for navigating your games list. You can scroll through the list of systems, go into any of the systems to see all the games for that system, and then start it up and start playing. You can also press the select button on the controller to bring up the settings and open up the advanced system options. In here, you can select specific options for the system. So if you want to, for instance, change the emulator, or add or remove the bezel on the outside of the screen, or apply a shader, this is where you can do it. One quirk to the Super Console X2 is that it came configured to run at 720p by default. I had to manually change that to 1080p in the settings. And then a few of the systems were preset to 720p too. A bit annoying that we have to tweak those settings ourselves, but it's easy enough to do. One other unique thing about the Super Console X2 is that it has this area here with some instructional videos.
First one, please insert the TF card to your Windows PC through card reader.
It's actually adorable. It's super useful. For example, some of the PS1 ROMs don't have music tracks. I'll explain that later. So let's say that your favorite game, you want a version with music. You want to be able to add that yourself. Well, you can do that, and there's a little tutorial here to show you how to do that. It's a small thing, but it's a nice touch. Really quickly, I'm going to scroll through the list of systems. I'm not going to read them all out to you. You can pause the video or watch it in slow motion if you want to see for yourself. All the old retro stuff is on here, obviously. All the old computer systems like Commodore 64 or Amstrad CPC. All the old home consoles like Atari, NES, Sega, Super Nintendo, PC Engine. Portable systems like Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, PSP. And then some 3D consoles like Nintendo 64, PS1, Sega Saturn, and Dreamcast. Although I'll say right now that not all of the higher end systems will run perfectly. More on that in a bit. One thing we like to do around these parts to see how complete the games list is the Doom search test. We do a search for Doom and see if any important ones are missing. And this here is a good set. All the important ones here except for PS1, I think. Not bad. Now, for those of you who are new to these Android box consoles, with any product that claims to have like 100,000 games, it's expected that we'll have lots of duplicates. And yeah, we do. Lots of dupes in Atari, for instance. Regular NES doesn't have any dupes, but SNES does. So they're obviously mixing and matching ROM sets. Look at this. ZX Spectrum, 18,000 games. Oh, there's so many dupes. Look, there's 18 copies of 1942 here. I don't have any problem with these companies putting all this stuff on here. It's just a little bit misleading when you expect to get 100,000 games. But even still, there's a lot on here. Complete collections of all the old stuff. Nearly every single Atari game ever released, including lots of games that are absent on lots of these Android consoles. All the old stuff, all the Atari and NES and Super Nintendo and Sega or whatever, you're not going to be missing anything at all. For the higher end systems, with Nintendo 64, we get 256 ROMs. That's a complete ROM set, all English language, so that's nice. There are lots of PS1 games on here, 655 games, mostly US games too. Nintendo DS only has 18 games, so not many there. Sega Saturn has 24 games, there's 23 Dreamcast games, and 283 PSP games, although most of those are PSP mini games. Overall, this is a pretty extensive list. I wish we could have had more Sega Saturn and Dreamcast games, but for a 256 gigabyte drive, this is actually a pretty well done list, apart from my gripes with the duplicates. The games will run right out of the box for the most part, with a few exceptions. A few arcade games will need to be tinkered with. For instance, Dungeons & Dragons Shadows over Mystara didn't run on the default core, but it ran fine when I switched over to the Final Bird Neo core. This is pretty standard with these things though. They come with multiple cores for this reason. It's a shame that we have to tinker a bit to get them working, but at least they do work when you find the right configuration. The vast majority of stuff will run just fine right out of the box though. There's just a few exceptions. The performance of these Android boxes can be pretty hit or miss when it comes to the higher end 3D systems. We should talk about the specs really quick though. The Super Console X2 uses the S905X2 chip, which is a quad-core 64-bit processor clocked at 1.8 GHz, and it's more powerful than the older S905 or the S905X chip. But it's not nearly as powerful as the higher-end Android boxes that use the S922 chip, for instance. Still, we should get some better performance than the older Super Console X or the Super Console X Pro. We also get 2 GB of DDR4 RAM and 8 GB of eMMC internal storage. So how does the Super Console X2 do? Well, starting off with PS1, going right for the hardest game, Bloody Roar 2, and we're running at full speed. I tried upscaling to 2x resolution, but that wasn't running well, so don't expect to do much, if any, upscaling. However, at native resolution, all these PS1 games are gonna run just fine. I should mention that the PS1 collection on this thing has lots of games that don't have music tracks. This is a pretty common thing on these Android boxes. They remove the music tracks to save space. That's how they can fit so many PS1 games on here. But you can add your own ROMs that have music tracks. If your favorite game doesn't have music, I usually do that for a few games on these things. The Nintendo 64 is great. The vast majority of Nintendo 64 games will run problem-free. There will be some issues with the very hardest to emulate games. Games like Cruising USA, that they won't run at full speed. But even some pretty darn demanding Nintendo 64 games ran fine for me. Like F-Zero X, that ran fine just right out of the box. I don't think you'll find many problems with Nintendo 64. Sega Saturn worked fine, but you gotta switch the emulator to the standalone Yamasanshiro emulator. Once I did that, everything ran fine there for me. Dreamcast worked okay for the most part. There was some slowdown here and there, but I'd say everything that I tried was playable. It was way better when I switched to the standalone Flycast emulator, and there you can get perfect performance if you turn on frame skip, if you're in a tinkering mood. PSP is mostly PSP mini games, but it does have quite a few AAA games. However, the performance is going to be meh, not that great. God of War didn't run well, which is no surprise, but neither did Gran Turismo. I'm sure there's some stuff that will run fine, just not lots of the higher end 3D stuff. The Super Console X2 is, well, I mean, it's really good, but it's got a few problems. There's lots to like, but there's some stuff to be annoyed about. But that's how these Android emulation boxes go. None of them are perfect, really. They're supposed to come pre-configured and ready to play, and they are for 99% of the games. But some few games require different cores or different settings, and some rare games don't work at all. And I think it's easy as a reviewer who looks at lots of these things to really get hyper-focused on the things that don't work, and forget that for the vast majority of people buying these things, they're not going to be bothered by those things, if they even come across them at all. Because when it comes down to it, most of the stuff on here works fine. You know, I don't think you should let any of the negative stuff turn you off of buying one of these sorts of products. I love these things. They really are an amazing value. If you're looking for something super simple to play your old favorite retro games, these are a no-brainer. It's probably the easiest and cheapest way to get access to all these great old games. It comes with everything you need: the console, the emulators, the games, the controllers, all ready to go. You can add additional controllers if you want to do 4-player arcade games or Nintendo 64 games. The front end is fun to use, fun to navigate, and it is just fun to play these games. Replaying all your old favorites that you loved when you were a teenager or a kid or a baby, and being able to try out other games and consoles that you never even had. This is like 30 years of video game history at your fingertips. That's what you get here. However, if you already own an Android emulation console, then this probably isn't for you. It's not going to be much of an upgrade, if anything. That said, the performance is good for the price. If you don't have an emulation console and you're thinking about picking one of these up, I think the X2 is a fine choice. You can buy it on AliExpress, it'll be a little bit cheaper there, but if you want the peace of mind and the speedy delivery of Amazon, you can get it there. That's what I personally recommend, actually. I've had a few weird experiences buying stuff on AliExpress lately. I'll leave a link to this thing in the description below if you want to pick one up. And that brings us to the end. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. What I really want to hear from you is, what's your favorite retro game? Mine is Burger Time on the Game Boy, but I'd love to hear about your own personal favorite. I asked this question before, and I got a bunch of suggestions, and I checked them all out, and I discovered a ton of games. You guys have good tasting games, so let me know what you like in the comments below. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you like the video, like an awesome person, or don't if you didn't, you miserable piece of garbage. That's it for me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.